Hello and welcome to In a Spiritual Sense, where we discuss all things spiritual. From growing your intuition, speaking with spirit guides, diving into past lives, the paranormal, and more, join me, Stacey Piagno, where we work to bridge the gap between science and spirit. Hello and welcome back to In a Spiritual Sense. I'm your host, Stacey Piagno, and today we're going to talk about two terms that in some way are the fundamental building blocks of life: Dharma and Karma. Now, both Dharma and Karma are life concepts that stem from Indian philosophy, and we hear a lot about them in many Eastern religions. And although you can find multiple meanings between these two terms based on the specific religion they are tied to, what it basically boils down to is that our Dharma is tied to our path of rightness, our eternal truth. It encompasses ideas such as duty, rights, our character, vocation, the religion that we follow, and any and all customs and behaviors considered appropriate to keep us on our highest path. Dharma is our soul's purpose. Karma, on the other hand, as I like to think of it, is the balancing of our scales as we work towards reaching our Dharma. It is the equal exchange of energy that we receive based on what it is we put out. In many Eastern religions, it can be described as, quote, the relationship between a person's mental or physical action and the consequences following that action. It also signifies all the consequences of all the actions of a person in their current and previous lives and the chain of cause and effect in morality, unquote. And whether or not you follow Eastern or Western religions or any religion at all, this overall concept of discovering our purpose and living in that is on some level something that we all truly crave. And the concept of karma, the law of attraction, is science. These are not only principles described in religion, but they are principles based on life itself. So today I want to discuss the relationship between these two concepts and how we can better work to balance our karma and therefore step into our dharma. Now, I first want to dive into karma, and we've talked about this a little in the past during the quantum healing and past life episodes, but I feel like this concept of karma is something that is often misunderstood. I think a good generic definition shows us that you get what you give. It's the consequence to all of our actions. And although this is a good starting point for us understanding, I think most of the misconceptions come from the word consequence and this idea that we become in debt to our choices or to the relationships around us. First, the word consequence, I just want to explain, is not a negative term. A lot of times when we are teaching others or when we were once taught, the term consequence gets thrown around as an outcome of bad behavior. For example, a child makes a bad choice, that child gets a punishment. This is an example of a consequence. It teaches us the idea of responsibility that stems from our choices. But what is also a consequence is, let's say, a child who makes a choice that is helpful to another, and that child has now gained a new friend. So receiving a friend is a consequence of that kind, helpful choice. Consequences have no relation to the idea of good and bad. A consequence is simply a word to define an equal exchange of energy. And what is very powerful is the simple fact that we get to determine if the energy at play is good or bad based on our intentions and our perspectives. Once we place an intention or a perspective on any situation, we are therefore imprinting an energetic frequency on that situation. And it goes out into the ethers, waiting to connect to that of like energy. And this is the concept most of us hear explained as the law of attraction. Again, you get what you give. But what is not often explained about the law of attraction or karma that I want to make clear is that we have way more control over what is happening than we may realize. And it's because we as spirits have the ability to transmute energy. And the way we are able to transmute and therefore gain control is dependent upon our intention and our perspective. To start, intention is what will initially imprint a situation. So what we are feeling and thinking and wanting during each and every choice we make, and during each and every thought we have, is pulsating an energetic imprint on what it is we will encounter as a consequence, a reaction. And we will often receive the energy from that reaction as the connected outcome. And I want to get into the receiving of this in a minute, but there's something else that I first want to explain. And that is that this principle of karma is within itself applied to each soul independently. And I'm going to try my best to explain this. The karma that we create for ourselves and the karma that we receive for ourselves is purely between us and us. Karma is not something that somebody else can affect you with, nor you them. So let's say that someone hurts your feelings. The consequence of this, you may think, would be for them to some way have their feelings hurt. Or let's say someone punches you in the face. The consequence they might receive is for them to be punched back in the face. And now I'm not saying that's not going to happen, but this is not so much how it works. If you can follow me for a minute. It's not so much about receiving an equal physical or emotional act, that is the karma, but more so about receiving an equal energy from the intention behind the act or thought that is seen as karma. So again, someone hurts your feelings. Just because you were hurt by this person's actions doesn't mean that they are going to feel the same thing that you felt. It's not their fault you intook the information the way you did. And I'm not being unsympathetic when I say this, but instead reminding us that there is a truth in which no one can determine what we feel but us. We may not see it this way, and it may be hard for us to understand, but this, however, is a universal principle. We are in control of our energy no matter what is happening on the exterior. And we'll discuss this in a minute. But if the law of karma states that it exists only between self to self, then your reaction to something has nothing to do with that person's karma, but instead yours. You see, karma is the reaction from an intention, not the act. And only you can receive that equal exchange of energy because you are getting what you put out. So some different scenarios could be: the person who hurt your feelings was mad because they got stuck in traffic and they were late to work, they left their lunch at home, and they've been having a really hard day, and you walked in and they snapped on you. Was their intention to hurt you? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe someone is not happy with themselves and they want to project their pain onto you so they feel they are not alone. Maybe someone is trying to fit in and they're longing for acceptance, and so they start cracking jokes and they go too far. The reason for why that person hurt your feelings really has no relation to your karma, but how you accept the energy they projected towards you will have an impact on your karma. Let's face it, we all react differently to situations, and we need to be honest with how we feel. But let's say we hold on to those feelings of pain that have been projected towards us, and we start to create an illusion of victimization. Well, the equal reaction to what we are energetically imprinting is that we become a victim. And the feelings that come with that will intensify unless we can change what it is we're emitting. And this is where our perspectives come into play. However, before we get into perspective, I just want to also state, when others do things that hurt us, whether mentally, emotionally, or physically, it doesn't mean that they won't be held responsible for their actions. It's just that this responsibility will take place between them and themselves independently. Because there will come a time, whether in this life or at the end of this life, when our soul is able to review any and all interactions we've had. You might have heard this explained as our soul's review. And I'm not going to get in too deep with this today because it's a rabbit hole within itself, but there is an importance to us having time to reflect on how we made others feel and how we made ourselves feel. And if we don't take time to do this in our waking life, we may more heavily experience this in the afterlife. But it is something that we will have exposure to. And this very powerful experience, many people talk about connecting with either after death or through near-death experiences or through meditations or ceremonies, or maybe if you're just a really reflective person, you already do this. But I do believe we all get to experience this at some point because in return, it helps shape and sculpt our soul. But again, this process is something that we will experience independently within our own self-reflection. And I see it as something that is more for our own expansion versus something that is karmically placed upon us on the behalf of others. So it's my belief that no act ever goes unseen. But as far as what we feel as a reaction from the choice of others is energetically in our hands. And this is where we get into our perspective. However, to fully understand how perspectives work, I want to back it out a little and share another universal truth that is important to understand if we are to be in control of our perspective. And so the framework is, there are as many different realities as there are souls. This means there are as many different perspectives as there are souls. And our reality is based on our perspective. So you see, it's not just one reality that we're all living in like most of us think. We each hold our own perspective of reality through the reflection of our own experiences. This is what it means when you hear someone say, our reality is a mirror of us. Our thoughts and our experiences are what project and make our reality. And our reality is solely based upon our own truth. The definition of reality is what we deem to be real. And we all have different understandings and different truths and different backgrounds. Therefore, we are all living in our own reality. And sometimes we get into conflicts when we think others share our reality. Yes, we may agree on certain aspects of a reality, but each soul reflects their own projection of life. And that projection is what they experience as real. So, not to get in too deep with that, but what's exciting about this idea of karma is that when receiving whatever it is that has been energetically produced, we can transmute that energy, our own karma, into something that better serves us if it is something that we don't want to receive. And this is when our perspective comes into play and when things get really interesting. Let's go back to the example of when someone hurt your feelings and how it's not their fault that you took the situation in the way you did. Now, the initial feeling we get is valid, 100%. And this initial feeling we have will be a reflection of the beliefs and systems we have built for ourselves. So if I feel hurt because of something you said or did, that's valid. But I have to understand I only feel this way because of the beliefs I have adopted in my life. And if I do not like this initial feeling as a response to what you did or said, I can then transmute it by giving it a different perspective or by placing a different understanding on it. I can recode that energetic imprint with a new perspective. This way, I will change that energy and the karma it carries to something I prefer versus something I do not prefer. Yeah, maybe the intention of that person was to make me feel bad, but through my understanding of why they did that, I might not be as affected. Or maybe I really don't care to understand why they did that. Maybe uncovering that itself takes up too much of my energy. So maybe I settle for not understanding why they did that, but just assume there's a reason for it and it has no connection to me. Sometimes we have to be creative with our viewpoint because whatever we believe, we will adopt as our reality. And the way we live within our reality is going to hold karmic energy. So again, intention imprints energetic codes to create energy. Intention is an output. And perspective imprints energetic codes on what has already been created. It determines what it is we receive. Intention is what we put out, perspective is what we pull in. And I think that's so important for us to digest. Now, Dharma, our purpose, I truly do believe that we have different layers of Dharma, if you want to put it that way. You know, I've mentioned in the past that no matter what it is we do in this life, our purpose is to experience. Therefore, on that level, we are all living our Dharma at this very moment, just by being alive. And within our lives, we are constantly having experiences that are either balancing us or unbalancing us, which therefore teaches us balance. You know, because the paradox of all of this is that by becoming unbalanced, we learn how to balance. So it's all relevant to our overall purpose, which is to naturally expand and have as many experiences as possible for the sake of consciousness. But within that, I think we will all come across a time where we are longing to express our true self. Who am I as an individual? What is my most aligned expression of me? What is it that I'm meant to do in this life? Yes, it is to exist, but how should I exist? What is it that will make me most happy? How can I live a joyous life and best represent my soul on this physical plane? Finding what it is that inspires you and finding what kind of life you want to leave behind is magical. And it could be something that is ongoing and ever-changing. But once we start to live in alignment, we will begin to vibrate at a frequency that matches that of love itself. It's a frequency that many would refer to as heaven on earth. And I choose to experience that kind of life. So, how do we find it? How do we connect with who we really are and step into our Dharma? Well, the two things I always like to take a look at are one's interests and one's hardships. What are you interested in, or what have been your biggest hardships in life? Because our Dharma is directly linked to this. As far as our interests, when we find what it is we are passionate about, and we are able to exude that vibration into life itself, we are then living in our Dharma. And the more often we exude this frequency, the more completely we will be living in our Dharma. We all come to this life with different interests and different skills. Why do you think that is? It's because there is something in this world that you and only you can do. There's a gift we each hold, and a specific way of using that gift that is so uniquely coded to you that no one else in the world could do it in the way that you can do it. But we can't reach that if we're not being authentic to who we truly are. So, what's your gift? Who are you? Well, you could start by asking yourself this question. If you could be anybody, if you could do anything, no boundaries, no limits, no judgment, who would you be? What would you do? How would you want to spend your time? Again, no boundaries, no limits, no judgment. There's a reason why we talk about linking our passions to our purpose. And from the way I understand it, is because when we are living doing what we love doing, we create that frequency of love. Love meaning purity. It's a high, expansive vibration, and one that in return will bring you on that same wavelength. And when we live on this wavelength, we are aligned with our highest self. And when we are aligned with our highest self, we are one with spirit. Our internal core is balanced. We are at peace. We're fulfilled. And by living in our purpose, we then inspire those around us to live in theirs, whether we know it or not, which again raises the frequency of the entire planet. And it all starts by you following something you're interested in. It's powerful. All you have to know is your next step, and make these steps as small as possible. Because when we are vibrating at our Dharma's frequency, opportunities open up. And we don't need to know the how. We just need to know what we want. And Spirit will guide you. That's why I think it's important to have time to play. You hear me say every episode, make time to connect with yourself. Get to know the way you individually think and what it is you are interested in. And if you don't know, great. That's even more fun because you now have the opportunity to explore and try new things. Become the person you want to be. Draw a picture, make a list. Visualize someone that you would want to become. Sometimes you could even think of who you're jealous of. Be careful with this though. Jealousy is a tool we can use to show us what we want, but we don't want to stay in that frequency. Just think of the qualities you want to hold and who you want to be and become that. We don't have to make this life so difficult. And if you're feeling lost, that's okay. It's all part of your path. Trust me. And sometimes starting all over is the best place to be. Oftentimes when we're feeling lost, it's as we previously spoke about, because we were needing a change of direction. Maybe you weren't taking that change of direction, so Spirit did it for you. Now you get to create. Go ahead, start over. You're the magician of your life, and you hold all the power to do so. Remember intention and perspective. These are powerful tools we have in our toolkit. And when we use them properly, we become balanced. When we don't, however, we become unbalanced. And sometimes, through our imbalance, we have hardships, which is something we should also take a look at because it is often linked to our Dharma as well. I mean, I could probably find stories for days of people who have been through a hardship which had later turned into their life's purpose. And that's because they used the hardship for what it was intended for. They transmuted it into their purpose, which is a big component of why we go through them. It was through his hardship that he gained experience and therefore was able to inspire others going through their hardships. And now he's a motivational speaker and he has a sturdy career that he enjoys and he gets to travel if that's what he wants to do and he has a family and life is now wonderful and great. And it all stemmed from this person's horrible situation. Let's say you have a physical ailment or a tragedy. Perhaps you learn to heal this ailment and now you teach others how to heal. Or you end up working in the health industry after a horrible injury or sickness. Or you work in crime due to a major injustice. Or you become a supportive parent due to the fact that you never had support from your parents. You see, these are just some examples among many of how one's hardship can be turned into their purpose. Hardships give us the ability to learn transmutation. Remember how we talked about perspective and changing our karma, changing that energetic imprint. Well, for one, going through hardships gives us the ability to learn how to do this. It directly teaches us the power we actually hold. And we can't practice using this power unless we have a situation to practice it in. By going through the hardship, one of its purposes is to allow us to practice using our power. And perhaps that in itself is your purpose. Maybe your soul wanted to learn how to work with energy. So in this life, you have to go through many hardships so you can learn that the power stems from you, not from your environment. Maybe that is you living in your Dharma. You see, although we're all having very independent experiences, in all honesty, we're all going through similar themes and lessons as one another. And when someone is able to morph their pain into their purpose, they help others do so, especially when we share our experiences. We are here to connect with each other. And when we interact with people who are going through similar situations as us, we bond and create communities. Maybe being part of a community is your Dharma. Our purpose doesn't have to be big and grand. It can be, if you want it to be. Maybe you just change the life of one person. Maybe you change the life of thousands. Maybe you make people laugh. Maybe you are inspirational. Maybe you create friction for other people to learn their lessons. And in return, you find out what it's like to be on the other side of the coin. We see these situations a lot when we discuss reincarnation. The doer comes back as the doee, because we have to at some point experience the flip side of the coin to fully grasp the whole truth of any situation. If you want to wonder why people are such assholes, perhaps your next life you'll come in as an asshole so that you can understand why people would act like that. We have to be more accepting to everybody and their place within their own spiritual path. We don't know why people are the way they are. We don't know why some people have to experience completely harmful lives. But from the spiritual perspective, it's because there's something within that experience that soul needs for growth. Yes, it could be a balancing out of literal actions they have previously performed. So let's say someone cheated on someone, caused them pain, and now they get cheated on so that they can experience that same pain. This could be the case. Or it could just be that they needed to experience the opposite situation so that they can therefore appreciate or better understand the entirety of that situation. Someone who has hurt you in this life could have been the bigger and better person in a past life or in a past situation. And it's not necessarily that you were the one that hurt them, so now you have to get hurt. Again, it could be. Or maybe it's just that that person needs to experience the other side of the coin to help them grow and to help them have a better understanding. And maybe in your life, there's something for you to learn from being hurt or from going through whatever the situation is that you're going through. So you and this person who has hurt you can come together and both work on your own karma and both work on your own expansion by experiencing what it is the situation is going to teach the both of you. Every relationship, every encounter we have with another holds some form of symbiotic relationship. There's always something to gain from experiencing a situation as the doer and the doee. And oftentimes, we will experience both sides of this. We have to step outside of ourselves and see our relationships as this moving play. Dolores Cannon is a past life regressionist that is very well known in the spiritual community, and she talks a lot about us acting as characters in a play. It's all about us being able to break limiting patterns and belief systems. And the more we can break these patterns, the more aligned we will be with our Dharma. And it may be that there are lives solely dedicated to balancing your karma, balancing your scale. And that within itself might be that life's purpose. Because although we all have an overall soul purpose, a soul Dharma, we may at times also have smaller life purposes. And so all together, all the teachings and lessons and experiences that we go through are all accumulating and working towards our soul's expansion, the overall soul Dharma. And we get there by going through the ride of karma. We can't have one without the other. Dharma inspires us to achieve and be all we are. It's the expression of us in our fullest capacity. And karma is the teacher. It results in us better understanding our responsibility. It teaches us respect, gratitude, love. It gives us the teachings of duality itself. Dharma is the push and karma is the pull. They fit into the natural rhythm and movement of life, the natural rhythm and movement of consciousness. They're principles. And as we become more aligned in our Dharma, our karma becomes more neutral. So that might have been a lot to swallow. I think sometimes these life concepts we discuss have such depth that we have to continue circling back around to them to continue gaining a deeper understanding than before. And so with that, work to live in your Dharma every day. Bring awareness to your intention and your perspective. And no matter what, stay true to who you are and don't settle for anything less. If you enjoyed this episode, please use it to inspire those around you, and I'll see you next time on In a Spiritual Sense. For those looking to connect further, please feel free to send emails to info@inaspiritualsense.com or hit me up on Instagram, where you can find weekly inspiration and updates. I look forward to connecting with you.